Can you maybe tell us in short why you've chosen this methodology, in the sense of why is it so important to have a high-profile performance for starting such an initiative that should go on for 3 years, and why is it that important if we want locals to take this on, to have these two trains going hand in hand together?
Yeah. Okay. There are two kinds of situations in which I do projects. One is where there is already a strong contemporary dance movement, where I'm asked maybe to put an input, and I can start in a very small way. It might be a small contribution that I make. And the other situation is where there's really no history of this kind of work, and where there is often a suspicion based on ignorance of what it is and what it can achieve. And what we find very often is that organizations and promoters of different kinds will recognize the need for a high-profile event that will focus attention, that will infuse people, that will encourage them to look further into the work, and that will take away some of the fear of a form of art which is really very new. People can not only be excited by the result and entertained and informed maybe by it, but also they can observe the process and know where it's come from. So it involves not only, for instance, young people who are participating, but their peers, their families, their teachers, their schools, people in positions of influence in the society. So very often, in fact, in nearly every case, I can say, the high-profile event has created great excitement and has led to a demand for more development.
So, in a sense, the high-profile performance meant that there was much more demand on contemporary dance. How could the locals deal with that, or what are the positive effects of that?
It's very important when you are doing a high-profile performance like this, and in my experience, you have to be aware of the impact it has, which can be very strong, that you have at least something in place or planned which will continue. And there will be a demand. In my experience, the parents will observe a noticeable difference in the behavior of their children, in the willingness of their children to communicate with them and with others, in behavior. There's a frequently observed change in how children are at school, in their ability and willingness to learn, in a new relationship with teachers and with learning. And so there will be a demand, and you have to be able to satisfy that demand in some way, have to develop a structure which will enable the work to continue and to be developed and to spread and to go into even greater depth in a way. Whether that's in schools, which is one area, or whether it's in community activities, which is another. So part of the process, the performance is the first part of a longer term process. What is also important is I can come in with my experience and get this thing started. I can act as a mentor. I can stay with it in advising where required and come in occasionally. But this also relies the development on the encouragement of local individuals with dance experience or with cultural education experience to continue the work. And so training becomes very important. It has to be possible to train, it's essential to train local people, local artists who will take over. That has various advantages. First of all, of course, they are coming from the same culture, will have a deeper understanding than I can have going into a new country or into a new situation. They will have a better knowledge of how the society works and how an infrastructure can be built up. And also, of course, it can provide career opportunities and work, or more work, for artists who are already perhaps struggling to make a living as dancers or as theatre practitioners, but also provides career opportunities for young people themselves.
You follow up a lot on the news of the Middle East, on Palestine in particular, also on local events. How do you see that such a project would especially contribute to a region like, or to a society like the Palestinian society, to a region like Palestine?
Well, I'm very used to working in societies that are undergoing quite extreme conflict. whether within the society or coming from outside. And whether it's we look in Ethiopia, or whether we look in Bosnia, where I worked during the conflict there, in Lithuania during the struggle for independence from the Soviet Union, which was a very big struggle and one which one never thought would happen. I've been in many of those situations, and I'm aware of the kinds of dangers that come about when a society often is forced back into itself, when opportunities are reduced for individuals and for communities and for the society itself to grow and to expand. And the kinds of things that I think are very, very important in that situation, be it deeply Muslim, as in Palestine predominantly, or whether it be a society which is under the very much influence of the Coptic Christian Church, as in Ethiopia, or indeed whether it's fundamentalist Protestantism in the north of Scotland. I've worked in many of those situations. And what I think happens in any society, regardless of the cultural, religious parameters, is that you have various things that happen. When a society is forced to look in on itself, you have a lot of frustration. You have, in the case of Palestinians, I see a lot of humiliation. And people need to respond to that. And they don't have an outside expression. Very often they don't have a way a means to respond in any way that is going to take them forward. Several things happen. I think first amongst the male population, there is a lack of opportunity to express frustration, to express the way they feel. That includes sadness, disempowerment, and so on. And because the opportunities are few emotionally, especially for men, there is a tendency to turn to violence or to aggressive behavior. This is a typical male reaction, of course, to such a situation where disempowerment, and one might say even emasculation of a certain sense, emotional emasculation takes part. So one of the great powers of this kind of dance, of modern Ausdruck or expressive dance, first of all, it can increase the population's or the participants' access to what I would call appropriate non-violent communication and touch. It encourages research into oneself emotionally to find out who one is on a deeper level. Gives one a broader, more expansive view of oneself as a human being. It encourages, because of the work process of working closely with others, it is a deeply socializing process. Contemporary dance, perhaps more than any other cultural experience. Touching, supporting, lifting, being supported, relying on others, being part of a group, working towards a common goal in which you play your part, sometimes having to take a lead, sometimes having to take a back seat. So it's recognized that in terms of normal human social skills, contemporary dance has a great potential and enormous power. And so that in turn leads to greater empathy. And empathy is something you will need in a situation like this. And as one has to believe that eventually freedom is going to come, eventually this is going to come to an end, then you have a society which cannot be fractured. People are going to have to learn to work together, because when the common enemy is gone, then something is so likely to replace it. And if you can socialize people in this way, if you can help people to become empathetic, if you can help people to understand themselves as individuals and human beings beyond the cultural aspects, which are also important, then you have more chance of achieving some kind of harmony that will take the society forward.
We spoke now about the masculine frustration.
Sure.
What about the women? How do you see the project could affect women as women as participants of youth, women as participants themselves, women in the society?
I have worked in many situations where women are in the hierarchy, if you like, not at the top of the ladder, let's just say, where you do have differences in how men and women are perceived in the society, which can also lead to discrimination, but also can be extremely frustrating, because unless women are emancipated or have the possibility to emancipate themselves, you are losing an enormous amount of skills. 50% of your population that perhaps is not really being heard and not being able to bring their skills, their intellect, their knowledge to the service of the society. So with contemporary dance again, there is the possibility in a non-violent and non-threatening way to ease the relationship, to change, if you like, for the better the relationship between the genders. This doesn't mean that people are not able to continue to respect cultural norms, but at least there is more element of choice, and that men and women working together in this way can get a deeper insight into how the other gender is working. It leads to new respect. And I found that frequently, and it doesn't just apply to Muslim societies that I've worked with Muslims, or even to Christian societies where you have a similar kind of gender difference in how people are functioning in society. But what I noticed in every situation with young people is that there's a definite change in the way that men regard women, and there's a new respect for the abilities of women, and there's a new sensitivity between the sexes. So I have no doubt, and others who work in this field have no doubt, that it can make a major difference in the relation between sexes. I would add to that I think one of the problems very often is that it is quite hard for women to get, shall we say, to get in touch with their bodies. In other words, there is a restriction which can inhibit expression in a physical way, and this is very important. Our ability to appreciate and to respect ourselves as physical beings is very important in our health. It encourages emotional and mental health and strength as well.
So it is part of the project that you will not only be working with youth in the course of the coming couple of years, but maybe to involve other social groups like women.
I think that you have to reach out to as many sectors of the community as possible, because after all they are all interconnected. You are going to need the support of women as mothers, for instance.